God has been engaging with humanity throughout our story here, but more in like snippets. He'll talk to one guy at one time, and he'll communicate something, and there'll be this stretch where it's kind of man is expected to live off of what he's communicated back then, but not a lot. With Moses, we're going to see such a level of interaction from God that has heretofore been unprecedented in the Bible. God is going to talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. We're getting into that with Moses. Pretty cool. Just cool to see God revealing himself so much more through those conversations. So it's very enjoyable for me to get into that and start into it there. Before we go into Moses, though, let's just catch up from last week. To get to this point, throughout Joseph's life, he consistently counted himself a follower of God. What was his allegiance to God based on? Talking with Joseph. He was a follower of God. What was that based on in his life?
He was a prophet.
Yeah, to an extent, he was a prophet. God was communicating with dreams and stuff. Or I could say, what was his allegiance to God not based on? Maybe that would help narrow it down.
It wasn't based on the fact that things were good.
Exactly. It wasn't based on his experience, right? It wasn't based on, okay, things are going well for me, God must be in favor. Oh, things are bad for me, God must have rejected. He wasn't doing it. He said, this is what I know to be true of God. This is what my forefathers have told me. God has made these promises to us, to my family, to followers of him. I'm going to believe that no matter what. That was what he was betting on. So sorry, I asked that question in a weird way. He believed the communication from God that had been made available to him. His circumstances were not the basis for his belief. Something we saw in the life of Joseph. How did Joseph summarize the factors that led to his position of power in Egypt? He had a summary statement there.
This was God's doing.
This was God's doing, right? Brothers, the evil that you did, God actually used that to accomplish good. This is something that God had his hands in. Right. Okay. God used the wrong that was done to accomplish good. And he said, actually, God used that to provide for my whole family. That's how God is. This was part of God's bigger picture. What promises did God give to Jacob, not Joseph, did he give to Jacob as he moved his family to Egypt? Right? Jacob is moving. He's been told, this is the land you're going to be in over here. But Joseph is saying, hey, Dad, come live with me in Egypt. What did God say to Jacob in that transition time?
He's saying you're going to become a great nation and it's okay to go to Egypt. I'm going to prosper. Didn't he tell him that? He told him it was okay to go.
It's okay to go. It's a couple things.
I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to take care of you when you're whatever. What's the word?
Progeny. Yeah.
The word.
I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to take care of your family. You're going to die there with Joseph. Joseph's going to be there with you. Okay. You're going to die there. I am going to bring your family back. I'm going to take care of them there. I am bringing them back here. That still stands. Though you're going to Egypt, this is still your land. Those are the promises that God gave to Jacob as they were going. So now getting into today's lesson, and something that has stood out to me as we've been going through this. I don't know if you guys have noticed it. We've covered quite a bit of scripture so far, and definitely some major happenings have happened here. We've had Babel, we've had the flood, we've had the creation story, we've had Abraham, all of those things. As we've been going through, there has not really been confusing stuff here. And the little bit of confusion that there has been is not like a significant issue, right? Like the Nephilim. We didn't really get into that and stuff. There's a couple of obscure verses like, oh, what's going on there? Those are obscure verses and it's an obscure topic. It's not the theme of the Bible. It's not a huge topic in here. God's message so far has been very clear. There's not an issue. The issue that we have when we go to God's Word is, one, maybe we just haven't read enough of it to make sense. So I'm confused? Well, yes, you're halfway through. Like, everything hasn't wrapped up yet. There's that. The other thing that we have trouble with is not God's Word and the message communicated, but our response to it, right? Our baggage, like we talked about earlier. I come with preconceived ideas. I come with doubts. I come with issues of, well, that God says this, but that can't be true because of all these other things that I'm thinking. Well, that problem isn't with what God said. What he said was very clear and very easy to understand. The problem is I don't want to believe it. I don't want to engage with it. I want to make it mean this other thing. Well, yeah, but this guy says that. Okay. Well, God says this. It's been clear, and that was encouraging to me looking at how much we've gone over so far. It hasn't been confusing going through it. It's a very clear presentation of this is how God is dealing with humanity. This is why he's dealing with humanity. This is how he's dealing with humanity. This is his plan. It's there, right? God is communicating, and he's doing a good job. This is stuff that my children can understand what we're saying as we go through this. And I can look at it and really, have my mind working. It's not like baby talk. It's a big message, but it's done very well. The problem is, though, my interaction with it. And so we'll want to just kind of keep that in our head as we go through. What is God saying? And then am I willing to accept that at face value? All right, so if you want to jump into Exodus 1, we are in a new book now, Exodus. Finished up in Genesis last week. Exodus 1, verse 6. In time, Joseph and all his brothers died, ending that entire generation. But their descendants, the Israelites, had many children and grandchildren. In fact, they multiplied so greatly that they became extremely powerful and filled the land. That'd be the land of Egypt. This is one of those ones I was looking at. Pretty cool. That I was, this is one of those areas where I learned some stuff. I was trying to figure out, okay, what was the time frame there? So it says, their descendants, the Israelites, had many children and grandchildren. In fact, they multiplied so greatly. How long of a time are we dealing with here? Before I had read the passage, it says, Then the Lord said to Abram, so a while back, he says, Know for certain that your offspring will be sojourners in a land that is not theirs, and will be servants there, and they will be afflicted for 400 years. I was like, oh, so they were in Egypt for 400 years. But then I was looking, and you look at the dates, and you look at the ages that are given. It was like, oh, wait, no, they weren't in Egypt for 400. It wasn't 400 years after Joseph. So I was like, oh, well, how does that work? So I went and looked at it, and I was doing the timeline thing, and I was trying to figure, okay, how do these numbers add up? Because it's said a few different times. References are made to that. And so I was looking at that prophecy again that God gave to Abram, and it would be, I was taking it much more specific than I should have. I was like, oh, it means this. It's talking about the slavery thing. The Lord said to Abram, Know for certain your offspring will be sojourners in a land that is not theirs. Right? That started with Abraham, right? Abraham was a sojourner in a land, and his offspring were sojourners in a land that was not theirs. That was way back that started. And they will be afflicted for 400 years. That was a thing. Again, that's a general statement. They will be afflicted for 400 years in a land that is not theirs. Part of that affliction was slavery. Part of that affliction was, if you look, as Abraham and his descendants are going through this land, they're having trouble with the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah and that whole thing. They're having trouble all through there and bouncing around as they travel because they are sojourners in a land that is not theirs. And so I was like, oh, as I started looking at it that way, it made more sense. And what you see is, and I can't go through all of the verses because it ends up being one of those, in some passages it references some dates and things, and in some passages it references others and says this guy was sold at this time. And if you put them together, you get a nice timeline that says 430 years before the Exodus, before the children of Israel leave Egypt. So 430 years before that, God makes a promise to Abraham. This promise, right? This thing here. Hey, I want you to leave Haran. And then 30 years later, Isaac is persecuted by Ishmael. Be one of the moments that God says, hey, take note of this instance. Ishmael is criticizing Isaac. It's a big thing. I'm considering that a persecution is how it's presented. Ishmael, an outside actor as far as the line of the promised Redeemer goes, is being antagonistic towards the promised line here. And the Bible notes that Abraham was this old when that happened. This is when that worked out. And then we get down to when Joseph moves to Egypt. And from the time that Joseph goes to Egypt and reveals to his brothers and says, hey, everybody come here to Egypt with me, there's 215 years from then to when Moses is actually going to start leaving. So 215 years, but there's actually what was interesting to me was really as Joseph dies, he lives to like 110 years old. So Joseph brings his family there and then lives like 80 years. So they're all there together, happy, prosperous, everything's going well. They're in the land of Goshen, which is an ideal setup for the children of Israel who are shepherds, right? That's a perfect place for them. only 64 years pass from the time that Joseph dies to when Moses is born. It's a much smaller time frame. So it's only 64 years after Joseph before Moses is born. And then Moses is actually 80 when the Exodus thing starts, because he was 40 years old when he leaves Egypt. I'm skipping ahead here, but it was interesting to me to see the time frame. It was much shorter, which makes a lot more sense when you read the story of that we're going to get into here. The way that the Israelites are responding is definitely like this is a newly imposed oppression. There are people in this story that were born free Israelites as visitors. They're there. They're this subgroup, but they're free. There were people who were born free, were made slaves, and then would have left with Moses. Like that is
Really?
there could have been. I don't know. It wasn't like Joe was that guy. But
Well, it's like the kids of Israel, they were slaves.
They were made slaves, and we're going to get into that right now. There was a time when they were made slaves, but they came as guests of the second highest person in the nation of Egypt. And then they transitioned to slave, and then it was brought. But it was a much shorter time than I thought, which made it, you could see this was much more like, hey, to put it in perspective now, if Americans were now taken over by a foreign country, it would be very acute because we know the freedom we have now. And then if we were under an oppressive regime that came in, it like the next couple of generations, their grandparents are talking about, no, I remember what it was like to worship freely. I remember what it was like to have freedom of speech. I remember what it was like under America. That's what we're going to be getting into here. It's just really cool. It's like, oh, I always thought 400 years they were stuck in Israel or in Egypt.
I did too.
It wasn't. It's if you go.
Fascinating.
It was. I thought it was really cool. And so that 400 years is the promise of the oppression and the sojourning that would be going on throughout the life of the young fledgling Hebrew nation, which was Abraham, then Isaac, then Jacob, and it goes on. Pretty cool. I really enjoyed that, and it really just helped give new life to this passage for me as we go through, because it makes it much more relatable, I feel like. So, with that, the Bible is going to go at length in this chapter here to emphasize over and over. Israel went to Egypt with 70 people plus wives. It would be 70 people that are of the line of Jacob. So like mostly the men and things, and people affiliated there, and sons and grandsons. 70 plus their wives. So 70, 140 thereabout is what they went with, and their numbers increased dramatically, is what it said. And it's going to say over and over. Their numbers increased so much that people started to get nervous. Oh no, what's going on? There's more and more Jewish people. I was reading up on growth statistics, and they're saying, okay, if you take the average ages that we're seeing here, and you take normal human growth statistics, and you see how this works, it would be completely feasible for these people to have gone in the time frame of 215 years from when they moved to Egypt to when we see the Exodus happening, probably 2.5 million people total. And that would make sense with what is presented later on with a survey or a census that's done by the people of Israel, 600,000 men. Okay, adds up well with 2.5 million-ish people. So the population is booming there. And the Bible speaks at length to that idea. This is an uncommon population growth that we're seeing here. And mathematics would line up with it's possible, especially when you think they're in the greenhouse of population growth, right? They came and they were put into a perfect situation underneath a government. So there's a government in place that's protecting them, and they're in a favored status, and there are people that seems to really value children and having that. And there's a promise involved, and for at least the first half of their time there, they were being blessed by the king. They were a people that have been highlighted by the king to give them the best lands that they could ever have, and they're sheltered and protected. And we see their numbers just go up and up and up. Though in verse 8, we come up to what we know is coming. Eventually, a new king came to power in Egypt who knew nothing about Joseph or what he had done. He said to his people, "Look, the people of Israel now outnumber us and are stronger than we are. We must make a plan to keep them from growing even more. If we don't, and if war breaks out, they will join our enemies and fight against us. Then they will escape from the country." So the Egyptians made the Israelites their slaves. They appointed brutal slave drivers over them, hoping to wear them down with crushing labor. They forced them to build the cities of Pithom and Ramses as supply centers for the king. But the more the Egyptians oppressed them, the more the Israelites multiplied and spread, and the more alarmed the Egyptians became. So the Egyptians worked the people of Israel without mercy. They made their lives bitter, forcing them to mix mortar and make bricks and do all the work in the fields. They were ruthless in all their demands. And this speaks to the underlying fear of, I guess here, we'll skip that real quick and go to verse 22 as a summary statement. Then Pharaoh gave this order to all his people, throw every newborn Hebrew boy into the Nile River, but you may let the girls live. It gets to a point, he's like, hey, I'm going to stamp them out. No, more. It's not working. And so he goes, okay, we're actually going to start actively killing. But what's interesting with that is if you know anything about breeding or raising livestock or anything like that, was his attempt to stop the population growth?
He was trying to interbreed.
Well, no. So like if you've got a population that's growing and you say, oh, I want to stop the population from growing, so we'll get rid of the males or the females?
I would say the females.
The females. That's what we do. In hunting, it's the opposite, right? We say we want the deer population to stay stable. Kill as many boy deer as you want, basically. I mean, we do put limitations, but boy deer, you can kill lots of boys. The population will last because it only takes one guy. Women are the ones that have the limitation with, I don't like saying breeding with people, but to produce offspring, a guy can be the dad of a lot of kids with a lot of women if it were to come to that. Women are limited with that. So he's not actually trying to stop the population. He's trying to stop the strength of the people, right? His concern is fighting age people. Hey, if an army comes and threatens us, look at all these Hebrew men fighting age people that could come. I don't want men, but I actually don't want them to leave either. That was one of the things he says. Oh no, what if they come and they join the other people and they leave us? No, I like my workforce. This is actually working really well. I like my slave labor. So let's kill the fighting people. The people that could grow up to be soldiers, kill them. You can leave the girls alone. He actually specifically says it. I just thought that was really interesting. But you may let the girls live. I like that we have a lot of slaves. That's okay. Let the girls live. We can work with the girls. I don't want soldiers to come up. I don't want people to come up that could resist me. But I do want lots of Hebrews because that's helpful for me. They're both feared and valued, right? Because it says way early on, the Egyptians thought shepherding people were gross. They're like, that's a job that is beneath us. That's the gross people that do that. That's like a lowly thing. And here's a whole people that identify themselves as shepherds. We're shepherd people. We work with animals out in the field. That's what we do. Oh, that's like a whole society that's like, we're the septic workers. We're sewer working people. We're like, yeah, you're gross. I don't like you, but I really want you here. So there's
But I need you to come clean my septic tank.
Yeah, I do want you. But there's the otherizing that goes on, which is the common thing we see today. I skipped over the midwife story. You guys know that he tells the midwives, hey, kill the babies, kill the boy babies. And they're like, well, sorry. No, they don't. They don't do that. So that doesn't work. So then he goes to this broad, okay, everyone now, all male Hebrew babies should be killed by everyone. And you can even see in how he says it, doesn't say kill them, it says throw them into the Nile River. There's definitely an aspect of this that would be a sacrificial type of thing. They worshipped, I think his name is Hapi or Happy. I don't know how you pronounce it. It's the god of the Nile. I would say this is a sacrificial type thing. Hey, take these babies and sacrifice them to our God who gives us prosperity and fertility in the land. And there's some stuff that I was reading to say actually it would be the god of fertility for the Egyptians, the god of fertility. Hey, take their babies, the sign of their fertility, offer them to our god of fertility. Would be a correlation that could have been going on there. That's speculation.
They do have crocodiles in the Nile.
Oh, totally, yeah. I mean, this was a way to get rid of a body or a person. Go to chapter 2, 1 through 9. About this time, a man and woman from the tribe of Levi got married. The woman became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She saw that he was a special baby, or just, a good-looking, healthy baby, and kept him hidden for 3 months. But when she could no longer hide him, she got a basket made of papyrus reeds and waterproofed it with tar and pitch. She put the baby in the basket and laid it among the reeds along the banks of the Nile River. The baby's sister then stood at a distance, watching to see what would happen to him. Soon Pharaoh's daughter came down to bathe in the river, and her attendants walked along the riverbank. When the princess saw the basket among the reeds, she sent her maid to get it for her. When the princess opened it, she saw the baby. The little boy was crying, and she felt sorry for him. "This must be one of the Hebrew children," she said. Then the baby's sister approached the princess. "Should I go and find one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" she asked. "Yes, do," the princess replied. So the girl went and called the baby's mother. "Take this baby and nurse him for me," the princess told the baby's mother. "I will pay you for your help." So the woman took her baby home and nursed him. This is one of those stories where I was reading through it. I know the story, but it was really cool. It stood out to me. If you see this story, so if you start the midwives, which we skipped, so you got these two women, right? These two midwives stand up to Pharaoh quietly, but say, don't do what he says. He says, "Hey, I need you to kill these children." They're like, "No, we're not killing children for you,
Sorry,
Pharaoh."
They have their babies before they get there.
Yep, they make their excuse and they won't do it. And then you see, so there's these two women characters that defy Pharaoh, and then you have Moses' mom, who doesn't do what she was told to do, and then you have Moses' sister, who also is involved there, and then you have Pharaoh's daughter, and you have this woman after woman after woman that God uses, and what you really see is just what you were saying, Mom, the defiance and the strength that's put forth here by these women. Really cool to see that, like how God used. So I know it bothers me in movies and stuff where they want to, often it's like, we want to make a woman strong, so we're going to make her strong like a man is strong. And so we're going to have this little toothpick of a woman, and she's gonna kick this 350-pound muscular guy, and he's going to go flying across the room. It's like, that's not how a woman's strength works. Women are strong. I agree. Not in that way. Like it doesn't correlate. But you see the strength of women here, where here are women, woman after woman after woman defies the strongest government around right there, right? They're defying that for it in a nurturing capacity. They say, "No, for the sake of this innocent life, I will stand against the Pharaoh. For the sake of this innocent life, I will risk my life. For the sake of this innocent life, I will do." And you see this mama bear idea. And as I was talking to Rochelle, it's like that's where you see the strength of woman, is when it's defending innocence, when it's defending a needy thing. You see women shine in that role, and you say, "Whoa, look at that." And you think of the movements of the pro-life movement going on right now, predominantly led by women. A massive amount of women saying, "We will stand up for the rights of," very similar to this, the rights of innocent children. Or you see in the abolitionist movement with slavery, women were, "Hey, we will stand up," because there's that nurturing aspect that women have, I'd say naturally, given by God. And when that is embraced, there is such a strength and such a power there. And we see it in this story of the women that God used to bring Israel out of slavery, right? This is how God preserved the man that he was going to use to free Israel. Well, that man was preserved through the actions of women, very much so. And I think it's significant that God lists like 5 women, bam, 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 without hardly mentioning a guy. This is how Moses was preserved. This is how God set up his nation, was through the strength of these women. I thought that was really cool. I don't know, and it doesn't say what her thinking was when she put him in the river. I don't know if it was like a Hagar move where she's like, "You know what? I've done everything I can. I can't hide the baby anymore. I'm not going to kill him. I'm just going to put him in this basket and leave, because I can't bear the thought of actually being involved." I mean, she waterproofs the basket. She definitely takes steps to preserve his life. At the same time, kind of a weird plan. Like, it's not like he's going to live in a basket for his whole life. I don't know what her thought was. I don't know how much faith there was that something would come from this, or if she was just kind of like, "Okay, this is as far as I can go. I don't know." What we do know is she disobeyed. She was not doing what she was told to, and God used her disobedience to a wrongful edict for good, and he rewarded her for it. "Hey, here's your baby back, and now you're getting paid to defy Pharaoh." Like, that's pretty cool. And protection from the princess. You are protected by the royal family from the royal family. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right, verse 10. Later, when the boy was older, his mother brought him back to Pharaoh's daughter, who adopted him as her own son, probably 2 to 3 years old. Right? That's typical weaning in most cultures, be 2 to 3 years old. The princess named him Moses, for she had explained, "I lifted him out of the water." And Moses sounds like a Hebrew word, which means to lift out. Go to Acts 7:22. Stephen in Acts is talking about this. He fills in a little bit more of the history here. In 7:22, as he retells the story of Moses, we have, inspired by God, him saying, Moses was taught all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and he was powerful in both speech and action. All right, being raised among the children of the ruling class, Moses was afforded a special education. By being adopted by the princess, he wasn't just given protection. He was now going to be getting the best education available in the land of Egypt. He was being groomed to be a leader and an elite person. And not that education makes someone more or less important or anything like that, but there are skills that are learned, right? Someone who has had an education is going to be better equipped in areas than someone who hasn't, right? That's just a fact of life. And I would say most of his peers who were born in slavery probably getting less than even a typical education, right? That they're going to have a different sort of experience. So he is definitely being put in a position as a Hebrew that would stand out. He's turning into the best educated Hebrew there, right? That's pretty cool. And then we see in Exodus 2, verse 11, many years later, it's actually 40 years, right? We know from later on in Scripture, he's 40 years old at this time. Many years later, when Moses had grown up, he went out to visit his own people, the Hebrews, and he saw how hard they were forced to work. During his visit, he saw an Egyptian beating one of his fellow Hebrews. After looking in all directions to make sure no one was watching, Moses killed the Egyptian and hid the body in the sand. The next day, when Moses went out to visit his people again, he saw two Hebrew men fighting. "Why are you beating up your friend?" Moses said to the one who had started the fight. The man replied, "Who appointed you to be our prince and judge? Are you going to kill me as you killed that Egyptian yesterday?" Then Moses was afraid, thinking, "Everyone knows what I did." And sure enough, Pharaoh heard what had happened, and he tried to kill Moses. But Moses fled from Pharaoh and went to live in the land of Midian. And I'm just going to keep on reading here, and we'll go back to this part in a minute. When Moses arrived in Midian, he sat down beside a well. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters who came as usual to draw water and fill the water troughs for their father's flocks. But some other shepherds came and chased them away. So Moses jumped up and rescued the girls from the shepherds. Then he drew water for their flocks. When the girls returned to Reuel, their father, he asked, "Why are you back so soon today?" "An Egyptian rescued us from the shepherds," they answered, "and then he drew water for us and watered our flocks." "Then where is he?" their father asked. "Why did you leave him there? Invite him to come and eat with us."
Come on, girls.
Moses accepted the invitation, and he settled there with him. In time, Reuel gave Moses his daughter Zipporah to be his wife. Later she gave birth to a son, and Moses named him Gershom, for he explained, "I have been a foreigner in a foreign land." If you want to go back to Acts 7, where we just were, 7:25, same thing. Stephen is telling this story, and he fills in a couple gaps here. Speaking of this situation, he says, Moses, saw an Egyptian mistreating an Israelite. So Moses came to the man's defense and avenged him, killing the Egyptian. Moses assumed his fellow Israelites would realize that God had sent him to rescue them, but they didn't. So Moses attempted to rescue Israel in his own power. You even see in this story here, he's identifying, he was raised in Pharaoh's household, he's identifying with the Hebrews, right? He says, he goes to see his people. I go to see, and it references it over and over, my people, your brother. He's identifying with the Hebrews here. And now when he steps in, he kills this Egyptian, it's not just to right a wrong that he sees happening. He's saying, hey, I'm going to lead my people out of this oppression. I see what's happened to them. I disagree with it. I'm going to lead them out. And it didn't go like he planned, right? So he comes back the next day expecting to be the hero, and the opposite. He gets run out of town, and he's terrified. Israel was enslaved to an evil king, an enemy of God, and their attempt to save themselves didn't work, right? Utterly failed. Only God is able to save his people here. Man's attempt to free themselves didn't work. Only God could save these people, and that's obviously a type, and this whole story is used as a picture of the larger meta-narrative, right? This is a small story. It's very much has so many similarities with the larger meta-narrative of we are enslaved to sin. We are Satan's people, right? We have this evil overlord who's ruling over us. Only God can save us from that, just like here. Only God could save the Hebrews from their slavery. If any Hebrew could have done it, it would have been him. And I really liked something to keep in mind here in that Acts passage. I think it was Acts 7. It was the first one, I think, 7:22. Moses was taught all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and he was powerful in both speech and action, right?
Yep.
He was raised in Egypt. He was powerful in speech and action when he was young in this time here, and he's ready to be the leader, and he has those qualities, right? Keep that in mind for later on in the story. It's kind of significant. Here, at this point, when he has his ability, so he is educated, he's a good speaker, he's strong, he has influence. He goes in his own strength to make this happen. I'm going to free my people, and he goes and tries and fails. Right? That just happened. Now we'll keep on going with the story, and it moves along with there. Leaves, a loser, right? He leaves, that didn't work. He's a total failure. Leaves. Now we're going to pick up the story in Exodus 2:23. Years passed, and the king of Egypt died. But the Israelites continued to groan under their burden of slavery. They cried out for help, and their cry rose up to God. God heard their groaning, and he remembered his covenant promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He looked down on the people of Israel and knew it was time to act. Years passed, and the king of Egypt died. 40 years is what we're told later on. He was 40 years old when he left Egypt. Now it's been 40 years he's been away from Egypt. So years passed, a lot of years. A long time passed there. Chapter 3. Yeah, we'll just keep on going. One day, Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law, Jethro, the priest of Midian. Same thing, different name for rule. He led the flock far into the wilderness and came to Sinai, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the middle of a bush. Moses stared in amazement. Though the bush was engulfed in flames, it didn't burn up. This is amazing, Moses said to himself. Why isn't the bush burning up? I must go see it. When the Lord saw Moses coming to take a closer look, God called to him from the middle of the bush, Moses, Moses. Here I am, Moses replied. Do not come any closer, the Lord warned. Take off your sandals, for you are standing on holy ground. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. When Moses heard this, he covered his face because he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord told him, I have certainly seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cries of distress because of their harsh treatment, because of the harsh slave drivers. Yes, I am aware of their suffering, so I have come down to rescue them from the power of the Egyptians and lead them out of Egypt into their own fertile and spacious land. It is a land flowing with milk and honey, the land where the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites now live. Look, the cry of the people of Israel has reached me, and I have seen how harshly the Egyptians abuse them. Now go, for I am sending you to Pharaoh. You must lead my people Israel out of Egypt. I'm just gonna skip over the meaning of the burning bush. I don't like the speculation that goes into that. It definitely got Moses' attention, right? It was, hey, I want Moses over here on this mountain so I can talk to him. Here's a burning bush. Moses comes to see it, and then God engages with him. The significance of a burning bush, I don't think it's really worth going into that time. It's nice to think about, but I really like that God speaks about what's going to be happening here. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. One of the things we want to see here. So Moses tried to save Israel, failed, right? Now in verse 8, I have come down to rescue them from the power of the Egyptians and lead them out of Egypt, right? Says God, I am going to be the one who frees Israel, is the claim that God makes. And then he ends with, and I'm going to use you to do it, but it's me that is saving Israel. That's how he enters into this discussion. And God tells Moses that he's going to use him. He doesn't say, hey, Moses, what are your thoughts about being a part? I'm putting together a team, Moses. What do you think? He's like, hey, I'm saving Israel, and I'm going to use you to do it.
That's scary.
I mean, that's the discussion that went on. It wasn't a discussion. This was a telling. I'm bringing you into what's going on here. Go ahead and verse 13, but Moses protested. Oh, sorry. God answered, sorry, man, I'm getting all lost. In verse 11, but Moses protested to God, who am I to appear before Pharaoh? Who am I to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt? That's actually kind of interesting, right? That's not what he said 40 years ago. 40 years ago, I am the man who will lead my people out of Egypt. I am equipped. I am ready. I can do this. Now, 40 years later, God meets with him and says, I'm going to send you. And he's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Not me. I'm the wrong guy for this job. You see, his perspective on himself has very much changed. His perspective on his abilities, very different here. God answered, I will be with you, and this is your sign that I am the one who has sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God at this very mountain. And I like how God talks about what's going to happen as if it's a done deal. I'm going to send you, and when everything I said happens, you're going to come back here and you're going to worship me. He's just like, I know exactly how this is going to play out, says God. But Moses protested again. If I go to the people of Israel and tell them, the Lord, the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, they will ask me, well, what's his name? Then what should I tell them? God replied to Moses, I am who I am. Say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say this to the people of Israel, Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my eternal name, my name to remember for all generations. That's pretty cool there, how God presents himself, right? Because there's nothing in Moses' experience that God could say, well, I am like this. Tell them I'm the God that's powerful. Tell them I'm the God that's big. Tell them I'm the God that whatever. It's like, no, the only thing I can really compare myself to is myself. I am like me. I am who I am. I am the self-existent one, right? There's the tense aspect there. I'm not the God who was. I'm not the God who will be. I am the God who is. Tell them the God who is the one communicating with you. And obviously the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He's self-existent. He's outside time. He's outside the constraints of our world. The God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, the God of the promise, right? The only God that you guys have ever had any interaction with, I am that God, and I am over and above my creation. I'm over and above this situation. I'm outside the constraints of time. I am a big God. I'm the God. And in verse 16, now go and call together all the elders of Israel. Tell them, Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, he was repeating himself, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob has appeared to me. He told me, I have been watching closely, and I see how the Egyptians are treating you. I have promised to rescue you from your oppression in Egypt. I will lead you to a land flowing with milk and honey, the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites now live. I'm going to keep on moving here. The elders of Israel will accept your message. Then you and the elders must go to the king of Egypt and tell them, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. So please let us take a 3-day journey into the wilderness to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God. But I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless a mighty hand forces him. So I will raise my hand and strike the Egyptians, performing all kinds of miracles among them. Then at last he will let you go, and I will cause the Egyptians to look favorably on you. They will give you gifts when you go, so you will not leave empty-handed. Every Israelite woman will ask for articles of silver or gold and fine clothing from her Egyptian neighbors and from foreign women in their houses. You will dress your sons and daughters with these, stripping the Egyptians of their wealth. Again, God says what's going to happen like a done deal. It's not like, okay, you go do this and then we'll strategize. Like, here's exactly how this is going to go. You're going to tell him that you want to leave. He's going to say, no, I'm going to do this stuff. It's going to change his mind. Like, it's just going to move along and move along. Again, God is completely in control of the situation here, which is made more impressive by the fact that Pharaoh is acting of his own volition, right? God knows how Pharaoh will react, and he knows what he will do, and he knows how Pharaoh will respond to what he's going to do, and yet Pharaoh is the one choosing to do it, right? It's one of those, you've got man's free will and God's sovereignty working together to make God's sovereignty even more impressive in this situation. And then in Exodus 4:13, they go and they go and they go and they talk. But Moses again pleaded, Lord, please send anyone else. Actually, go up to verse 10, because I like this one up here. 4:10. But Moses pleaded with the Lord, "O Lord, I'm not very good with words. I never have been, and I'm not now. Even though you have spoken to me, I get tongue-tied, and my words get tangled." And God talks to him. But Moses again pleaded, "Lord, please send anyone else." And there's such a thick irony here as Moses argues with the God of the universe, saying, "No, I can't go argue before Pharaoh. I'm not good at that." 5 times, actually, like every time Moses responds to God, says, God says this, Moses' response is like, but here's reasons why this isn't going to work. And God says more, and Moses is like, actually, no, counterpoint. Like, it's this, not even a debate, but he's just complaining and arguing and fighting against him. And his argument is, no, I'm not good at arguing. I'm not good at speaking. I'm not good at opposing powerful people. God. It's like, okay, there's a silliness here, and I don't think it's lost on God. This is a broken man. This is someone who went out, on his own abilities, on his own merit, on his own strength, he went and got completely crushed. Everything gone, and now he's run away, and he's hiding in that, and now God is saying, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to use you. And he's like, no, I have no abilities here. I have no strength. I have no power. And I think that's why God is using him here. Now he's come to a point where this is a useful tool, because before he thought he was going to be the one doing this. And God's like, no, you're going to get in the way. You've got too much of you, Moses. I'm going to let you be broken. 40 years later, now you're malleable. Now you're someone I can use, because what I want the world to see is that I am saving my people, and you happen to be the person I'm using, not you, Moses, saving the people. And so we really see the change in his speech there. So before, he's this confident guy, like we were saying, in Acts it says he was a confident, well-spoken, educated person. He's broken. And now when God interacts with him here, he's like, no. I have nothing to offer here. I am a failure. I'm a screw-up. I'm a loser. I'm like a shepherd guy over with the Midianites. No one even knows about me. I'm a nobody. Because Moses has been brought to a place of humility, right? Moses is at a place where he's going to be engaging with God from a lowly place, which is where we should be engaging with God from, right? He is humble. God, I am your lowly creation. You are God. I have nothing to offer here. And God's like, yeah, I know. That's why I'm going to do all of this stuff. Just really, that irony there I thought was fairly interesting. And then God responds in verse 14, "Then the Lord became angry with Moses. 'All right,' he said, 'what about your brother Aaron, the Levite? I know he speaks well, and look, he's on his way to meet you now. He'll be delighted to see you. Talk to him and put the words in his mouth. I will be with both of you as you speak, and I will instruct you both in what to do. Aaron will be your spokesman to the people. He will be your mouthpiece, and you will stand in the place of God for him, telling him what to say. And take your shepherd's staff with you, and use it to perform the miraculous signs I have shown you.'" So God, he does allow Moses to, I don't know if I'd call it amend, as Moses is arguing. God does allow a slight deviation, right? He's like, hey, I'm going to be using you to free my people. He's like, okay, fine. I'll use you to talk to Aaron, and then we'll go from there. But still, he doesn't like, okay, you know what, Moses, you're right. I'm wrong. You're useless. I'll just use Aaron. He's like, no, I'm still using you, Moses. I will give you this little filter of your brother, because you're such a whiny person, and you just like, I'll meet you there. But God still keeps his plan going forward. Like, no, Moses, I've marked you to be the person that I'm going to use. That's not changing. Like, this wasn't an interview. I'm telling you, this was a recruitment. Like, you've been drafted, kid. You're part of my program. Sure, we'll bring your brother in as well. And what's cool is in this conversation, so we see Moses is like, well, come on, what about Aaron? I guess God says, fine, here. How about Aaron? But we see later on, in verse 27, in 4:27, the story kind of switches back a little bit. "Now the Lord had said to Aaron, 'Go out into the wilderness to meet Moses.' So Aaron went and met Moses at the mountain of God, and he embraced him." So back here, when God says, look, Aaron is already on his way. God had already put it in Aaron's head. Hey, Aaron, go meet your brother. then he's talking with Moses, and Moses is like, no, not me, don't send me, I don't want to do it. It's like, okay, look, Aaron's coming. Like, he'd already set it up. Like, I know that Moses is going to be such a butt, and he's going to stand against me so much. Like, I've already put it in action, this contingency of like, yeah, okay, here's your little buffer. But he still had the dog. But again, this wasn't God being caught off guard by the stubbornness of Moses. He already had that. Yeah, okay, I'm going to do this. Moses is going to fight me and disagree. So have Aaron there, and Aaron's going to come. Does it, but still the dialogue takes place. Just, again, you see God is outside of this program, calling the shots, and none of this is a surprise to him. He's got it clearly mapped out, very much in control of the situation, even with this thing that looks like Moses moved God, and God's like, yeah, I knew you were going to do that. Like, see, I've got Aaron here already. He's already en route. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's a really big deal.
And then we'll keep moving. Go to 4:18. No, already read that. Sorry. Oh, yeah. Okay, I read that too. Sorry. 28. Moses then told Aaron everything the Lord had commanded him to say, and he told him about the miraculous signs the Lord had commanded him to perform. Then Moses and Aaron returned to Egypt and called all the elders of Israel together. Aaron told them everything the Lord had told Moses, and Moses performed the miraculous signs as they watched. Then the people of Israel were convinced that the Lord had sent Moses and Aaron. When they heard that the Lord was concerned about them and had seen their misery, they bowed down and worshipped. And that's where we're going to leave the story for today. We've got, God has marked his person. He said, this is what I'm going to do. I am going to save my people. It is going to be through Moses, and it's going to go just like this. And now we're going to see him doing that. And a couple things stood out to me as I was going through this. Some of them I've highlighted already. I mean, obviously, God's faithfulness. Right? We see that over and over and over. And God's story says, when I communicate with man, I do it clearly, and I mean everything that I say. When I say you were going to be in a foreign land and you'd be slaves, that happened. And when I said I'm going to free you, that totally is going to happen. I don't forget, like we talked about. Like that's not a God thing. God doesn't forget, and he's going to remain faithful, and that is ever present in this story. But there was a quote that I wanted to read. It's from a book that I really like. It's called The Green Letters, or Principles of Spiritual Growth. And it talks, in one of the chapters, it talks about this situation here. The language is a little bit weird, but I think it'll still work. It is God's way to set people aside after their first start, that self-confidence may die down. Thus Moses was 40 years. On his first start, he had to run away. Paul was 3 years also after his first testimony. Not that God did not approve the first earnest testimony. We must get to know ourselves and that we have no strength. Thus we must learn, and then leaning on the Lord, we can, with more maturity and more experientially, deal with souls. And I thought that was just that cool concept we see in the life of Moses. Moses wasn't ready to be used by God when he was full of himself. When he's full of himself and his abilities, God let him fail. Let him go off the side. After his failure, after his humbling, right? And Moses is later talked about in Scripture as, I think, the most humble man who'd ever lived, I think is one of the terms that God uses to talk about Moses. And we see that God brought him to that place of humility so that he could be used in a mighty way. And until we get to that place of humility, we can't really be used by God because we're going to get in the way, right? I just thought that was one of those really interesting things about this story, the fact that Moses' epic failure when he had abilities, and now he's going to have this amazing success because of what God is doing there. Really cool. And with Israel, with us, it is God who saves, right? We see that story. It is God is the one who is saving here, and it is this story very much in the New Testament gets brought as a type. Hey, remember the people of Israel? That is the same God that we're dealing with now on an individual basis in our salvation. So next week, God's going to bring the hammer down on Egypt, and we'll get to see a bit more of him really, again, presenting himself in a big way to the world, definitely to the Israelite people.